I wonder if, I am on now, thanks. I like to do a bit of feedback to start off a session. Good morning, I'm Anne Single. I'm one of the co-chairs for the International Scientific Program Committee this year. I'm also the chair of the Patient and Citizens Involvement Interest Group within HTAi. Welcome to our Plenary 2 session. Today's going to be a debate about HTAi building public confidence, and I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator for this session, who will be familiar to many of you. She is Heidi Livingston. She's the Senior Public Advisor at NICE and a long-time hard worker within the Patient and Citizens Interest Group. So welcome, Heidi.
Thank you, Anne. Welcome everybody to this plenary session, the debate about whether HTAi builds public confidence or not. It's great to see so many of you in person, especially after the last few years we've all had in our various ways. And welcome also to those of you online. It's great to be back. So this, I think, is a great time to have this debate about what public confidence in HTAi, whether it exists or not. And we're going to bring this to you from a range of stakeholders, so you'll see them ranged on both sides of me. We've got for and against. And at this time, I would like to remind you that these aren't necessarily dearly held personal views, but we've asked the speakers to take particular positions. So please don't think we've suddenly got rabid speakers. We don't. We've asked them to take these positions. But we hope you'll find this interesting, informative, and it'll just be the start of an ongoing debate, which we hope then to take onto social media. So I think this is a really good time to talk about this. As I've mentioned, we've all experienced the pandemic in its different ways. And, there's been shock, fear, grief, sadness, and I hope in the end, hope, and we've all been learning, I hope, from the pandemic. I've certainly learned a lot about myself, and it's been really interesting watching people in your family, in friendship groups, locally, regionally, nationally, internationally, how people have all interacted and believed different things and taken information on and decisions on and behaved in different ways. So I think that plays nicely as a backdrop to this debate. So I hope we've all learned and will continue learning from this. I'd also like to reflect back to one of last year's keynote speakers, Neil Bertelsen, who I thought talked really powerfully about the learning from the two pandemics, the HIV and the one that still hasn't finished, but the COVID pandemic that we've all experienced in our various ways. And before we go into the debate, I thought it would also be a good idea to talk to you a little bit about the HTAi Patient and Citizen Interest Group values, because I think they also have the potential to underpin confidence, public confidence in HTAs. And there are 5 of them. The first is relevance, and I think this is the easiest one to get our heads around. This is that patients have unique experience, views, knowledge that nobody else has, none of the stakeholders, it's unique to them. The next one is fairness, that they should have the same rights to contribute as other stakeholders. The next is equity, so balancing those views of people with specific health conditions with other people and everybody else in the healthcare system. The next is legitimacy, and this is about including those people that the decision will impact on within that decision-making process, whether they are part of the decision or whether they bring information and evidence to that decision. It helps with transparency and legitimacy. And last but not least, there is the value of capacity building. And this is if you involve patients or patients in the public in the HTA process with an HTA body, both of those build up capacity to work with each other. So the patients build up that knowledge and capacity on what to bring to an HTA and what helps and what adds value. And the HTA bodies themselves can increase their capacity to work best with patients so that the relationship is mutually beneficial. If you'd like to know any more about those values, do come to our stand. There's quick publicity. When you come into the main hall, it's the first booth. Do come and chat to us. There are also standards that underpin HTAs in general, and also individual HTAs. So without further ado, now we will go into our debate, which, as I said, is just the start of it. I hope you will really enjoy this debate. We're starting with a 4, which will then leave you at the end with the against, and you'll all be able to vote. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Claudia, who is the Chief Exec for the Austrian Institute for Health Technology Assessment. So please come and fire us up.
So thank you for inviting me, and thank you to the audience that you came here at this time of the day. I thought that we would be alone on the panel. Now, I want to contradict our yesterday's keynote speaker when he said several times that we are exposed to fantastic innovations day in, day out, all through the year. I would like to communicate the same message a little bit more cautiously, with saying that a lot of the industry and the academic researchers are highly productive, and a lot of inventions are coming to the market each year. But we have to distinguish whether those are true innovations, and I think there are very few true innovations coming. Then there is a large proportion of marginally effective or non-effective at all. And then is another large proportion of interventions we do not know anything about because of approvals happen these days on single-arm studies or on very weak evidence. So I'm a little bit more cautious about saying that there is so much innovation out there. And for that reason, HTA is the safeguard of public health resources, is the safeguard of solidarity-based healthcare systems, and takes care that the resources are wisely spent. What we do is, and the public can have confidence that we do this cautiously, is to distinguish between hopes and hypes, on the other hand, truly evidence-based and proven interventions, and only the proven interventions find their way into the benefit catalogs. We should also, or the public could have confidence that we communicate about the true effects, but we have to earn we have to earn this trust and the confidence in HTA, that HTA is actually doing this job. And with earning this, and I think you've heard that already several times yesterday, and you will hear this even more often, that the trust in us can be earned with robust methodologies, with full transparency in processes and in the products, with a declaration of interests of conflict of interests on who is paying for our assessments, with equidistance to stakeholders. And when I say interest groups or stakeholders, I do not only mean industry, I also mean the payers, because they have their own interests. And we have to be, we can be held accountable for what we are producing, hopefully on robust methods. And now I leave the floor of being only optimistic. I would like to say a few more skeptical things. If the public really can be confident in HTA, that we are also covering, or that we are also giving a voice to those patient groups who do not have a lobby, And when you look at our program here, and when you look at our institutions back home, or the work programs, we are only product-driven, but there is another kind of medicine out there as well, social medicine, I would say it. It's only an umbrella term, but and there are lobby, and only patient groups that have a lobby are covered by us. I think we should be skeptical about that. That, for example, children and adolescent psychiatric patients are not given enough attention. They are now more in the media after the COVID-19, but then can the public be confident that we communicate enough about uncertainties and evidence gaps? Example, the 3 approved spinal muscle atrophy therapies. Did we really communicate enough how much is known to the patient and how much is not known to the patients? Do we contextualize evidence sufficiently? Do we lay open the evidence on settings, on professionals, on skills that are needed to deliver the interventions or the interventions properly? And finally, I'm really skeptical about whether we contribute enough for the challenges of the days. Those are I call them the HTAs, the affordability, availability, and accessibility. And I think HTAi is very good, and public can have confidence that HTAi is doing its job when it comes to assessing marginally effective interventions against other marginal effective intervention, but HTAi is eventually not doing the job on the macro level, providing our methodology to politicians to work for better regulations. So I think that communication is key, communication on uncertainties, and involvement of patients, of course. Thank you.
So I'm going to take the liberty of just reflecting some of that back before I introduce the next speaker. So one of the things that chimed with me most, Claudia, was the we need to earn trust, and that's hard won and easily lost in my experience. And a number of the other things that you said were communication, and that's obviously key. And it was interesting around communicating about marginally effective interventions and, what's truly innovative and what's not really very innovative at all and only has sort of slight benefits. And also what we do about those patient groups who have less of a voice, which is, of course, why we all work on evidence in HTAs. So that was really helpful and interesting and a great start to the debate. Thank you very much. I think it's given us a great grounding to start with. So now I'd like to move on to Linda, who is going to be for against. So Linda, please do join us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, on this early hour and this beautiful stage. Yesterday, I received a letter from the Dutch Healthcare Institute with a concept decision whether medical revalidation will be reimbursed or not. You can imagine that it brings a lot of fear for the patients who received those revalidation already and are now afraid that they can't use that in the future anymore. So this is health care decisions, taking away things from people they can rely on otherwise. I think that's a very big, a strong power to be against the public confidence in healthcare decisions. It takes away things from people. Instead of helping them to say, well, it should be relevant because this or that. And there is then a lack of trust in those decisions of the healthcare. And why is there a lack of trust? Well, there are some reasons, and I think you hear it from us in different ways. It takes a long time. It's very silent when the decisions are made. There is no collaboration between stakeholders to make the decision better or more informed. The words which are used from the healthcare institute is different than the words that are used from patients or medical insurers or physicians. And are there patient-relevant outcomes taken into account, or as just clinical outcomes? So people don't recognize the decisions they are made. And I put it firmly because I'm against the confidence, of course. And how can we make things better? I thought about it, and I think there are some points that has to be taken in account. When you have a process of decision-making, tell your process, what you are doing. Explain them to patients, because it's relevant that they know which steps are made and they know why it takes such a long time for studies or for debates, and whether they can use their voice or not, and what is an accurate way to make things more clear. The other one is make your decisions clear. Do it in a clear way of saying. Don't use words you don't use to your daughter, to your father, to your sister. Just make it very clear. And the last one is take the knowledge of patients into account by health decisions. I don't say it always has to be yes. That's another way of that's not my point. But I do say when you collaborate to decisions, it's easier to explain yourself. And that's it.
Thank you very much. So my able assistant here has just mentioned that people's names and affiliations aren't actually showing up on the screen. And I mentioned earlier that we were having 6 different perspectives. So we've had the HTAi perspective now. I'm sure you've realized that we've had the patient perspective, and Linda is part of a patient organization in the Netherlands representing over 200 different patient organizations. So to reflect on what Linda has said, it's about, decisions being removed from people, from patients. It's about not using words that are familiar and language that is familiar to patients, to people that we would use with our friends and family, most of us. It's about whether patient outcomes are taken into consideration. And then there's an awful lot about transparency. So while the words and the terminology reflect that, there's also actually it's how we couch those decisions, but to explain really clearly the process and the methods that we use to reach that decision, and actually to write that decision in a way that anybody could understand, that you don't need to have practiced reading these documents for a long time to understand what the decision is actually making. So I'm hoping, Linda, that I'm paraphrasing this correctly. Does that sound right to you? Okay. So that's more to think about in this debate. So we've got, we're moving on again now to 4 with Alicia, who is head of global rare diseases at Sanofi in France. So go do your thing.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure. So, first of all, I would like to state a disclaimer, because all that I'm going to say has not to be considered any company position. No? My opinions are based in that I'm a medical doctor. I used to be an HTA doer and user, and in the last 12 years, I'm working in global medical affairs, rare diseases, Sanofi. Okay, I'm supposed to be pro-but. Well, the confidence, the trust, I think is not an absolute concept. No? There are some granularity between it, and even between trust and lack of trust is a skepticism, as Claudia was mentioning as well. No? And you never know which is more complicated to manage, the untrust of the skepticism. In order to look at the confidence of the trust in HTA for informing decision-making in a trustable way, I would like to make it granular, because HTA is about science and policy, methods and context. So you have to be trust. When we are talking about trust in the science, it's very important that refers to the confidence that we have in the evidence that is evaluated and interpreted. When I mean evidence, clinical evidence, patients' evidence, PRO evidence, economic evidence, etc. And of course, then the recommendations according to this evaluation of the quality of the evidence. This is the first step, which is so important. Sometimes we assume that the evidence is evaluated right. But in order to get the confidence, it has to be very, very accurate and very adaptive to the evolution of science. But in terms of the contextual part, the trust, of course, has to be with the way the decisions are made, the processes, the transparency, the inclusiveness, the values in which are potential deliberations, because before giving the value judgment are done. So, trust or untrust, but, if you make it granular, you can distill what we are talking about and why it could be trustable or not. I'm pro, because I'm very, 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 very sure that the HTA has the potential to contribute the quality of healthcare. Because by making trustable HTA, you can have recommendations about to have effective, safe, efficient ways to invest and to reimburse the appropriate technologies, services, care programs. I'm deliberately, in a deliberate way, sorry, not using only the term technology, because I think HTA can do more than only assessing technologies. In fact, when this focus is only based on the scrutiny of the 20% of the expenses in healthcare, it can cause distrust, because what about the 80% of the expenses? In this portion of healthcare expenses, there are a lot of room for efficiencies. So when HTA is only focused on 20% of the expenses, and if I'm talking about rare diseases, which is my area, it's 1%, 3% at maximum in some countries. Well, it goes, we're wondering why, no? So, let me see that in terms of the evidence, the evidence interpretation, as I mentioned, it's crucial. So if it is not accurate, then it can cause distrust. And I was asking to give some examples in order to be concrete. In the case of PRO, a PRO outcome, for example, in a randomized control trial, in a rare disease with a small sample size, ultra rare, so it appears that the PRO is not statistically significant. When this is interpreted that there is no benefit for the patient, maybe the PRO has not captured, but doesn't mean there is no benefit. Maybe there are other ways to capture. Then it causes, especially for the patient, distrust. Or when, in the opposite, when the PRO in this trial, I'm talking about trial, I'm not talking even about real-world evidence, it's a statistical significant, but then it's considered, secondary endpoint, softer. It's not a hard endpoint. So it causes trust because it's a way to demonstrate effect. So again, or quality. I'm touching very, very concrete examples on when you are using quality to make decisions on rare, when there is growing evidence about the validity, challenging the validity of quality to capture the value of treatment for rare diseases. For example, 3 clear examples of even being good and being the most trustable way to inform decision-making, depending on how it's done, the evidence, it could be considered untrustable. So, in order to overcome this, my proposal for this solution, I think these are the old slides, but well, I will try to remember. I think, for me, early scientific dialogues and continuous scientific dialogues with multi-stakeholders, for me, are the solution. I think there is a fantastic program in Europe, I think very innovative in that way, which really can improve both the effectiveness and the efficiency of both development processes and HTA processes. Because talking from the beginning about these scientific issues really could help the developers and the HTA. And being very, very, very creative, I'm thinking how we have already this European new regulation in which the consultation, but I'm even thinking further, being creative. Why we are not thinking, for example, in a kind of PPP, public-private partnership, in which we can be more adaptive, using methodologies, more iterative research, more adaptive evaluation, maybe in order to be able to gain the confidence and consolidate the confidence of the society in HTA and decision-making. That's all for me.
Thank you very much. So again, really interesting, thank you. So that started with the concept of trust again, and then confidence and granularity. And we started out with science, policy, methodology, quality of evidence, ways decisions are made. And then we came onto values and value judgments and the interpretation of evidence. And I can't help, when I hear this, thinking back to all of the information that has been delivered, pumped at us during the various stages of the pandemic, and how we have all reacted differently depending on our backgrounds. And those of us who work steeped in evidence all the time were probably listening to the evidence, and other people were listening to the evidence more skeptically. And this definitely relates to HTAi. And then you went on to talk about PROs and also then things like QALYs not picking up patient benefits properly. And I think we're all familiar with that as a concept and as a pitfall, that we know that these measures tend not to be sensitive enough, and that's why we need to include patients to include that confidence. And then you talked about early dialogues, and I think we need to take the term dialogue properly, that it's not pumping information, that it is collaborative and it is speaking and it is communicating, and it's continuing that dialogue right through from the early development through the HTAi, but then actually beyond, and then we come back to this life cycle approach where we need to keep that dialogue going throughout, and then we bring it back through the cycle again. And so it does need to be, as you said, iterative and adaptive. So I think that was really helpful. Thank you very much. So we now move on to the opposing view again. So Philip, who is a journalist here in the Netherlands, and he's used to working with professionals, policymakers, and patients. So let's hear from you now for your opinion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Heidi. I have to admit, this is somewhat of a novelty experience for me. Under other circumstances, I'd be out there amongst you scribbling down notes, or when on stage, it'd be me asking the questions. Then again, as a journalist, I've been writing on healthcare policy and innovation for 20 years or so. So I'm happy to share a couple of insights from my perspective as an editor, or should I say, a communications expert. Now, the other day, a telling thing happened. I had an interview with an authority on health technology assessment. I'm going to mention no names because it's not relevant for this point of time. We had a nice, open discussion. My source was outright critical about a couple of things. For instance, the introduction, the way we introduced proton therapy in the Netherlands, or the fact that the electronic health record is so closed that you can't really use it for assessment purposes. So I thought, thumbs up, sharp, meaningful, critical insights, that's we need for a mature health technology assessment. Then, just before publication, the communications department stepped in. Could we not please skip those critical remarks? Now, this made me realize how deeply embedded health technology assessment is in the official policy-making process. Or maybe sometimes it looks like, even if it's co-opted by the powers that be. Rule of thumb seems to be, to me, don't step on any toes. That might be okay when you're dealing with politicians and policymakers, but it's a bad way if you're looking to build trust and legitimacy amongst professionals and citizens. So, the million-dollar question, does health technology work? In the Netherlands, we have several examples where it apparently did not. I already mentioned the proton therapy centers in the Netherlands. We have 3 right now, and I think they're all still waiting for patients. Another example is the Da Vinci surgical robots. More than a quarter of the Dutch hospitals have one or more. Now, these come with a price tag of about 2 million euros, and maintenance running up to 1 million a year. You can do the math. Even academic researchers looked into this case, and they concluded there has hardly been any discussion about the need for these surgical robots, the amount, the geographical spread, etc. In other words, we don't discuss under what circumstances new technology should be implemented. Where health technology assessment does have impact in the Netherlands, it's in the field of new medicines. It's even regulated by law. However, to me, this process in practice shows some fundamental flaws. Health technology assessment is too often focused on narrow financial parameters. I think ideally health technology assessment should be about the broader relevance for society. What is the added value, explicit added value for new technology for society as a whole? Linda already mentioned, that's my second point, the prolific use of coded language only those in the know can understand. Even to me, sometimes it's hard to interpret HTAi findings, and so I guess that's even, that goes for professionals and citizens too. To put it bluntly, to me it seems as if HTAi too often is practiced as an academic exercise instead of a device for the common good. Now, if we're looking for enhanced public trust and participation through better communication, the answer is right there. Health technology touches our lives in a very, very direct way. So it has the inherent possibility of show, don't tell. Now, we too often rely on dense written reports while we can use new findings and just show what it does to people's lives. Simplifying communication has the added benefit of speeding up the process of health technology assessment. I think this is important because the pace of innovation is ever increasing. A lot of these new innovations have a hybrid character, especially the ones with digital components. So that means they're partly within the regulated domain of healthcare technology, and at the same time in the open domain of consumer tech. Now, more often than not, it's consumer tech that sets the pace of innovation. And let's not forget, big tech is ever more present in health and the healthcare industry. Now, if they take over, health technology assessment runs the risk of becoming redundant. Now, there's some good news too. Maybe consumer tech provides a useful yardstick for measuring medical technology. Functionality, user-friendliness, and connectedness could all be criteria for weighing new med tech. So my advice to the HTAi community would be, speak straight, simplify, and speed up. We at the Dutch Health Hub, where I work now as a journalist, we are happy to help you with that task.
So I might want Philip to repeat those final words at some point. That was very helpful. Thank you very much. So I often hear that there's a bit of a tension in my mind between HTAi evidence evaluation and then potentially policy, government, what can and can't be said, and I think that's what you were talking about at the beginning, and I think that can muddy the water a lot, and the not stepping on toes and being careful what you write, that set real alarm bells off for me. As did the amount of money spent on surgical robots and not talking about, HTAs about that sufficiently. Also, the concept of the relevance to broader society, and we shouldn't, and I don't think most of us do forget that, but it might be easy to forget that in the throes of an individual HTAi. And something else that grated, because I recognized it, was that it shouldn't be about being an academic exercise. It's about real people, real lives, and affecting our whole healthcare system, and that's what affects the public trust, and it touches everybody's lives. And that's really important to remember. And then you talked about the pace of innovation and the digital components, and then moved on more to consumers of digital health tech and functionality. And I will get you later to repeat your 3 points because I didn't write them all down and I really like them, so thank you. We may possibly have time to take some questions later, so we'll see how it goes from now. We have a couple of more speakers, so now Iñaki from Spain or from the Basque Country, depending on how you look at that, from the Foundation for Health Innovation Research, is going to talk to you about the 4 points. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, good morning, buenos días, egunon. So that shows how HTAi also could help, so showing that in the context it is also tremendously important. First of all, I wanted to thank the society because when I was approached to talk in the plenary, I was saying, well, this is my first time, despite I've been 22 years working in HTAi. The other thing that is important, I need to advocate on HTAi. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I've been trying many years to explain my family what I was doing. I'm still trying to do. Many times, my brother-in-law or or my sister or my mother, they have said, but in reality, what are you doing? And well, I think I've reached to a point in which I think I can make an explanation, and I've given to them many examples. My brother-in-law has recently has a son, and I was saying, well, you have gone through a program that is around screening of deafness in newborn children. The report that established the program was done by my office. Also, in the case of my wife, recently, has started also in the screening program for different things, colorectal, breast cancer, and so on. So all those programs were based on a report that was done by my office also. Perhaps we are putting the blame on HTAi, and we are just the messenger, and it is true. We are thinking that HTAi is going to solve all the problems that we have as a society. And in reality, we need to think about what we are doing as a society. And HTAi is just the vehicle between two dots. On the one side, the health needs, and on the other side, the possible solutions. The solutions are the technologies, and the needs are those things that are related to the questions that the society has. Adi has said good things about what creates trust. And she was saying fairness, equity, and legitimacy. I would add some more. First of all, it's participation, for sure. So we need to make our society sufficiently participative in terms of making not just blaming on what the decisions are, but making part of the decisions. And this is a way not to blame on others. It is our also duty. The second thing is transparency. I think we cannot do things without knowing what in reality is happening, and creating some kind of dialogue in terms of that. I think it is crucial, and I think HTAi could be the vehicle. The third thing is accountability, and I think it is one of the first principles when you are using public funds. When I started working in a very nice project that is called Validate HTAi, and I thank very much Herjan and his team, and also Baya, to count on me for being part of that journey, that we are still on that. We thought about how HTAi can help in many senses, and we were talking about bioethics. In bioethics, the 4 principles of bioethics are non-maleficence, beneficence, autonomy, and justice. But if we go what HTAi is doing, it is pretty much related to bioethics. When we go to non-maleficence, what we are evaluating is safety. And it is true. It is one of the principles of HTAi also. When we are talking about beneficence, it is not just not producing harm, but it's creating some kind of value. And before it has been mentioned as innovation, and I think it is crucial. So we are evaluating efficacy. But when we are evaluating autonomy, there are many things that are related to that. One of those, it is context, for sure. The other one, it is related to the patient's voice, the professional's voice, and many other things. So autonomy is also rooted in HTAi world. And the other thing is justice. So correct allocation of resources in many senses. And those things are part of also of the HTAi world. My grandfather used to say, you need to follow the right path. He was quite left-handed, but I was trying to do so. And probably I wouldn't be here without a kick of my grandfather not to follow the right path. Another thing that is done by HTAi, it is, and I will refer to the roots of technology assessment, not even health technology assessment, and it has 3 dimensions. On the one side, the cognitive dimension, that is creating knowledge. And I think we are being quite elusive right now, because we are trying to, well, I think, forget that in many occasions that we are doing it is following the principle of evidence-based medicine, but not in the correct way. It seems to be that we are based, in the case of HTAi, we are based on the principles of evidence-based medicine, but nowadays we are confounding the principles of evidence-based medicine to the principles of trial-based medicine. And I think we are not right. There are many other things that are around evidence that are creating facts, but are combining them with values in terms of producing a better deliberative process. The second dimension of HTAi is normative dimension, that is creating dialogue. And that connects with another thing that we have mentioned before, that is participation. So it is creating dialogue in which we, in a fair way, we combine all the thoughts that we have as a society. I think it is crucial. And finally, the last dimension that I will mention, it is pragmatic dimension. So creating the landscape to produce that dialogue in terms of producing a good deliberative process, in terms of having the best decision possible. One of the things that we are not doing, and I'm fully aligned with the patient and the journalist, it is that we are producing a system and an HTA process that are mechanistic. So one of the things that we need to think is think out of the box and not making the process mechanistic, and think about which in reality the important questions are. And sometimes we go with the questions that we receive from the client, saying, the government is asking me this. In reality, this is the question that is important for the society, including all the stakeholders, so the patients, the professionals, the managers, the society in general. And that is one of the things that I make myself, one of the questions that I make myself every day. So it is trying to be no mechanistic in terms of not being what we have been called many times, the fourth hurdle. So once it is the safety, then it is the efficacy, seems to be that is solved, and we go to the regulatory process, and then it comes HTA to say no. No, and once again, we are putting the blame on HTA, we are putting blame on the messenger, and we are not putting the blame on how we are constructed as a society. So just to conclude, and I think I'm more or less on time, I'm advocating in favor of HTA, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And it is funny to see that nowadays we are talking about the life cycle of health technologies. That is something that we published 5 years ago, and also even that I'm very proud that at least some of the things that I've been advocating for, even they have been exposed by the keynote speaker. So it makes sense that I'm here. It makes sense that I continue, despite I need a salary, obviously, that I continue working on HTA and advocating in favor of HTA. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Iñaki. I was writing furiously, as you probably could tell, watching me. So thank you for picking up on my earlier values and adding to them greatly. And thank you for setting it into context of explaining to your family, because the number of times I try and think about explaining the job that I do, if I was trying to do it to some random person down the street who says, Heidi, what do you do? Big inhale of breath. Try and make this relatable. So I understand that one. So thank you for mentioning participation, transparency, dialogue keeps coming up, and accountability. Bioethics, and I think that could be talked about much more. Autonomy, justice, thank you. And the 3 dimensions. And one of the things I will take about from there, and I'm going to run rings around this, is about evidence-based, not trial-based. I don't mean we're jettisoning trials, but I think you all understand what's being said. And something else that chimed with me a lot was the mechanistic nature and the potential for the mechanistic nature without thinking about what really are the important questions. And then finally, don't shoot the messenger, but actually maybe the messenger needs to get much better explaining the message. Because one of the things that's come out a lot is how we use terminology and how we talk about things, and how things can be dressed up in a very academic way and not using plain patient-friendly language. And in a minute, I'm going to go back to the pandemic if I'm not careful. So for those of us in the UK, we had Professor Jonathan Van Tam, who became very popular with a number of us during the pandemic because he actually used language and metaphors that we all understood. And evidence and science is great, but many of us need more than evidence. And there's nothing wrong with evidence and science, but I think we've learned from the pandemic that we need more than that, that we need somebody to make these things translatable, to bring them into our own language, to be reassuring. I'll stop now. I realise that we have time and we would like to encourage some questions on the app. So if there are people who would like to pass any questions through when we've had our last speaker, we will take some of those questions before we go to our final vote. So on now to Guy, who is a professor of surgery at the University of Adelaide. And he is going to use some slides, and when he uses them, I'm sure you'll understand why. So, Guy, over to you.
Thank you very much, and I can fill the rest of the time, so you don't have to have any questions at all. I've got quite a lot to say. I am a bit surprised. I thought this was going to be a debate, and all I've heard is position statements from the affirmative side. They have not in any way addressed the topics and the points we'd made, and I take it therefore, as they're not refuting it, that they are accepting our views. We do not accept their views. Claudia got up and she thought she'd probably be alone here today, and frankly, the strength of her arguments, she may well have been. She did not explain to us how an HTAi works when hip joints fail, operations fail and systems fail, yet we should somehow or other have trust in HTAi. Alicia was even more concerning. She didn't even want to be linked to her company. Now, this is a worry. I would have thought her company would want HTAi to be something that it accepted, but clearly it's wanting to distance itself, and it does put her in an impossible position. HTAi can be more than assessing technology, but in fact does it. It just assesses the technologies. And I think that there is a problem. And then Iñaki, well, he's not even sure what nationality he is, which represents a substantial drawback to begin with, but his family don't even understand what he does. So how on earth does he expect the public to understand what he's up to? And to be told that his approach is to follow the right path. Is that the Donald Trump path that led to his COVID treatments? Because I'm concerned if we're going for right-wing solutions as the way in which the Basque, Spanish health technologies move. So if I could just start with my first slide. This is one of my patients who has liver tumours in their liver. Now, how do we go about assessing this? Do we use multidisciplinary team meetings? Is that the right thing to do to decide what approach we should use to manage this patient? I would say yes. Is there a health technology assessment that shows us that's the way to go? There is nothing. There has been no effort to try and demonstrate how liver tumours should be assessed by a multidisciplinary team in order to decide what should occur. That's not to say multidisciplinary teams don't exist, but where are the evidence assessments that we need to guide us in these matters? How do we work out what surveillance is required? How do we work out what tests should be added to the scan showing the tumours in the liver? And how do we actually know what the standards should be and how they should be monitored and followed? These would be, I would have thought, a pretty important part of the patient who has these tumours, yet there is no HTAi guidance and direction on that. And why not? Because it's hard. Let's just look at simple things like a tablet, but let's look at things that require complex analysis. The next slide illustrates the technologies that are available to deal with these tumours. Most surgery that is conducted today has had no HTAi applied to it. Perhaps some of the newer ones on occasions, if we're lucky, but even then, surgeons can change what they do and nobody is monitoring it or assessing it. If it goes well, that's great, everyone's happy. If it goes badly, it gets desisted with. Where's the HTAi? Where's the observation? Then there are various devices that can be used, and this is one of these ablation devices that can be used to measure this. These were introduced because they didn't rust and they didn't electrocute patients, but nobody actually knew whether they worked to deal with the disease. And in fact, they did not work. They worked for very small tumours. They did not work for larger ones. Patients should have had an operation to remove the tumour. They got an ablation, they got recurrence, and they had bad outcomes. Where was the HTAi? It came eventually, but long after thousands, hundreds of thousands of patients had pointless ablations conducted. Where are the registries that should have been set up? Often they're set up late, often they're voluntary, so bad results don't get reported, the good results do. So all of a sudden you get a very biased idea, and that's what the HTAi is being based on. We did a situation in Australia where we looked at aortic grafts being put into the aorta to manage aneurysms. And when the surgeons were compelled to give their results, otherwise they wouldn't get paid for the operation, we got pretty accurate data on 100% of cases. Then the surgeons complained and said, well, look, this is terrible, trust us, we'll give you the results. And the mortality dropped by 50%. And the reason it dropped by 50% is they didn't report those deaths because they could explain those. They weren't really part of the treatment. They shouldn't be counted. This is the problem. We do not know what is going on. How can you have HTAs and how can the public have any confidence in it? Then if we look at the learning curve associated with conducting an operation, how long does it take to get a surgeon good at the new operation? Now, some, like myself, can pick it up in 1 or 2 cases, but there are others who take hundreds of cases to do it. How do you know whether you've got the good surgeon or the one that's struggling? We don't know. We have no way of assessing it, and the HTAi is applied as though everyone's a homogenous surgeon, and that's clearly not the case. If we then look at the various operation options you are constantly trying to work out what is the right approach if you're going to operate. There are technologies now available. There's things called portal vein embolization, there's hepatic vein embolization, there's a procedure called the ALPS, all of which help make parts of the liver ischemic and enlarge the bits that you want to save. There is no comparisons out there telling you which works better. There are cohort studies showing that this worked really well in my hospital, but you don't have the studies that showed that this was a disastrous intervention, because who's going to report those? And so the HTAi assessor is only looking at the good results, and of course that's not what is actually happening. So then you have the surgeon. Who's done an HTAi on surgeons? Nobody. Yet, let me just suggest to you, there are problems. There are problems of burnout. We do not understand how or when or if that applies to surgeons. There are stressed surgeons under pressure. There are drug and alcohol problems with surgeons, and I saw some of those last night. There's age, which is a problem. As the surgeon ages, does his skill diminish? And if so, how do we know? How do we measure it? No HTAi on that. Insight, does the surgeon have insight? Most don't. Oversight, who is actually assessing the surgeon after they're qualified? In most countries in the world, you gain a surgical qualification and nobody assesses you until you either have a disaster or retire. It's a problem. So, finally, when you have these operations done and you end up in an intensive care unit, which is not unusual if you're having major surgery, what do we know about the volume of cases required to make that ICU function well? It is understood in some settings, it's not in others. Is this an ICU that works really well for elective but not so well for emergency? Absolutely, that occurs. Is there a surgical team available 24/7 to support it, or is it being run by people on their boat after the operation? And what's the failure to rescue in these environments, and how do we measure that, and how do we determine that the failure to rescue is occurring in an adequate fashion? These are really important questions that HTAi has not been able to wrestle with. So I don't think HTAi builds any public confidence. Thank you.
So Guy, thank you for that. I could see that as well as being informed, we're all massively entertained, and I'm sure you're a brilliant surgeon, but part of me wonders whether your vocation has been partly missed. And there will be another career for you, I think, in the future, which has very little maybe to do with surgery. So that also made me smile because one of my roles at one point was patient involvement in our interventional procedures, so that is related to surgery, and how very difficult that was to gain. And I will forever remember one of my colleagues on the phone to a family member of someone who wished to give feedback about surgery, and I remember her very patiently saying, yes, but how can we get feedback from them if they're dead? You've just explained to me that they're dead. I'm not understanding how we're going to get this feedback. And it was the most peculiar one-sided conversation I've ever heard. I never really got to the bottom of this. Anyway, so what Guy said, I think, has chimed with all of us. It's not necessarily what we think of normally when we think of HTAs. It was a very thought-provoking view, which was, of course, what we wanted from the debate. We wanted all of these different perspectives. And it was Guy earlier who, before we started, said, and please do make sure that everybody remembers this is debate and not necessarily our opinion. So as entertaining as he was being thought-provoking. We do now have a little bit of time before we go into the vote. So I'm going to see what questions have come through and potentially direct them to people. What's the one? Okay, this is where I'm showing my age.
Sure, it's in the middle.
Yes, you read it. You read it out.
So I can read it without the aid of glasses. So one of the questions we've had in, if people would stay still, is that per definition, HTAi is a scientific process. I'll put a question mark after that. Academic exercise that provides policymakers with knowledge evidence. Does the public trust academics and policymakers? I wonder whether our panel might like to give us some thoughts on that.
So who would like to go with that one? Who would like to start off?
You. Yeah, to me, it seems like more often than not, it's the other way around. So the policymakers and the government sets the boundaries, and they sort of use the evidence, so-called evidence, HTA brings to the table as something they can confirm their policy with.
Iñaki, did you want to? I got a sense that
yeah, well, I don't know why we elected Guy as president of the society. On the other side, someone that has a limited knowledge about medicine in general, and we consider surgeons as plumbers. But anyway, talking about the scientific aspects, perhaps I think we confound as I said before, trial-based medicine with evidence-based medicine. And there are different types of evidences that need to be inside that. Yesterday we talked about uncertainty and how to deal with uncertainty. And one of the issues was that, it was quite provocative because one of the people that were in the audience asked us why we don't make that quantitative. So we translate the dimensions that you are mentioning into a quantitative way. I think it is a matter, once again, a matter of trust. If we make a survey on what do you think about if 3 out of 5 people are in favor of, I don't know, changing the way that the government is doing things now, and on the other side is the far majority. In which side we put more trust? 3 out of 5, because we are thinking about the quantitative part as being the best way to define the right answer. But in reality, there are many other things. So we need not to deny that there are qualitative research that is also scientific, that could provide even more insights on how to do things. So I think it is the combination of qualitative and quantitative research that could make things more fair in terms of decisions.
Yeah, it seems like it's so entwined with the policy-making process that people out there sometimes doubt if it's really independent.
True, and, but once again, we are putting the blame on the messenger. So we are thinking that HTA is going to solve all the problems that we have as a society. That means participation, independence, accountability, and many other things. And not thinking that we need to establish a process by which we have trust on the things how they are done. It is the problem of HTA not showing that we are independent, or is the problem of the society as a whole that we don't trust on any process by which decisions are taken.
So, did you want to come back, or should we move to the next? Okay, lovely, thank you. So, I think Anne now has a question.
Oh, I was going to pretend it had come in online, but
do we have anybody with a
excellent.
microphone? Have you got a microphone?
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Yes, beautifully, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I have to go old school because the app on my phone isn't working. My name is John Gillespie. I work in Australia for a medical device company in health economics and reimbursement. I think Guy's points right at the end there really hit the nail on the head here. Isn't the question of public confidence related to where the responsibility of HTAi ends? Because HTAi informing a decision is one thing, but then its effective implementation and reassessment and the broader life cycle approach is really expanding the remit of HTAi. So a HTAi could be done fantastically from an academic point of view, tick all boxes, patients involved, absolutely perfect. And then the politicians take hold of it, and it's implemented badly, and that's all over the media, and then HTAi gets blamed. So I think the issue is, where does the responsibility of HTAi, stop and begin? And what does that mean for public confidence? Am I making sense? Thank you.
No, John, no, you can't go away. Don't go away. No, you can't ask a provocative question without then giving us your suggestion for your solution.
Well, it's what Guy said. It's a sort of learning health system approach, implement data collection systems. I mean, surely the technology must be there with some big tech companies. How hard can it be? Really, scan a few QR codes. But, I mean, being flippant aside, build systems from the ground up as part of the HTAi to keep measuring and learning what you're doing. That's it.
So we're coming back to the whole life cycle thing. Yes, lovely, thank you. I think we have the poll next. So this gives all of you with the technology the chance to vote on your for or against. And again, this is a question of, are you going to go with the evidence that you've heard, or is something else going to influence your decision making? So please do go to the poll now so that we can declare a winner, and we are going to give a prize of sorts to the winning team. Yeah.
So while we're waiting for that poll to come in, a question remains that we've heard a lot today about informing and not shooting the messenger. But in an age of a pandemic, we've watched that there has been a lot of information, but people still haven't trusted the scientific expertise, no matter how much information got pumped out into the community. So we have that issue that's being raised, and we also have this issue that the impact of health technology assessment is rarely measured. I'd be interested in the panel's responses to those questions.
Yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
Linda, do please start.
Well, academic knowledge is not the same as truth. And sometimes even in the pandemic period, we confuse them together. It's important, of course, but there are more, you have more taken into account to make a policy decision. And that's what I want to add on to your question.
Yeah, the way I look at it, it struck me that the HT we're talking about now, we're talking HT stands for health technology, and during this debate it occurred to me it's also about human trust. So maybe we should rename HTA into human trust assessment. The question today was, does HTA build public confidence? In its current form, I don't think it does. And maybe if we take into account more of the human aspect, it will.
Yeah, I'd be really interested almost to see this debate and this poll as a little microcosm of the whole issue that we're discussing about public confidence. What are we all basing our vote and our decision on? Is it evidence? Is it the human element of the speakers? Is it a mixture of everything? So I think that might be quite interesting as well.
I'm looking for a poll response.
I'm looking for a poll response and not yet seeing it. So is the technology there for us to be able to declare a winner? And are you all voting? Can I see some nods?
I can find the poll.
Oh.
We're going to have to go to hands.
Oh, let's go old school. Let's go pre-pandemic. Okay. Let's just have hands in the air. So we'll judge this together. Okay, so who wants to go with the 4?
Nobody.
We should copy that.
Who wants to go with the 4? I'm not trying to bias this. I'm just trying to check that we've got hands. Okay, lovely. You will need to show hands for against. I'm not having this wishy-washy nowhere in the middle. Thank you. So, and now hands for against, please.
Oh, clear.
And the lights have gone down.
Okay.
Okay. And before we finish here, who hasn't put their hands up? Please put your hands up. Yes, so there are some abstainers. Sorry, that's the old school teacher coming out in me going, all these hands haven't come up. Against? I think we can safely say, and I'm sorry you can't see all of the hands, it was against. So I am going to ask my lovely assistant here now to present this spectacular trophy to the team. Thank you.
It's for you.
So thank you all very much for listening to us. Please do continue this debate on LinkedIn. The details will be made available to you because I think really it's just the start of a really valuable conversation that we should keep going, and we've had lots of themes that have come out of this discussion, so please don't let it be the end of this discussion. We do now, in a minute, have a special event coming up around the Ukraine. So that's the next event here. So please do feel free to stay on for that important event. I know. And as with all weddings, something is always forgotten. A very special thanks to the speakers who've been phenomenal, not only in terms of what they've said, but the way they've said it. And I've certainly had a really enjoyable morning, so I hope you have done too. Thank you very much to the speakers.
Thank you, moderator.